Okay, great. Thanks everyone who's rejoining us again in room 1 of WB track today. This session is going to be 1 hour full of different lightning talks. They are intended to just give you a bit of inspiration for different use cases. Some of them are old wikis, some of them are new, and roughly we deal with the topic of cultural heritage, but of course in a very diverse range of speakers, institutions, countries, continents, etc. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Dragan Espenschied from Rhizome to talk to us about the art-based Wikibase. Thanks, Dragan.
Hi, thanks, Lusanna. So yeah, this is the art-based Wikibase quick presentation. I'll try to go through everything that has happened since it was unveiled in April and some of the things that we weren't able to cover in the original unveiling presentation at that time. So just for folks who are not familiar with where this is coming from, so Rhizome was founded in 1996. It's as a mailing list, it's a digital arts nonprofit organization based in New York and on the internet. And in 1999, it started the art-based collection, which had an open accession policy at some point, accumulated more than 2,000 works in the meantime, and for more than 800 works, Rhizome holds a local copy, at least one there. Since these are digital artworks and especially net art, you can find that many artworks exist. It's in several forms that we call variants. And yeah, we are using Wikibase to model our collection, to present our collection to the public, to make it queryable, and so forth. And so basically what we have achieved, that you might want to look at the video recording that you find here in this link. The link to the presentation is also like at the end of the presentation, is that we commissioned Wikibase Consultancy, also known as Professional Wiki, to create the local media extensions so that we can use our own images not located on Wikimedia Commons. This extension has now landed in the official Docker distribution of Wikibase, which is super nice. We customized the query UI for our specific needs and also to support the local media extension, more on that later. And we were using OpenRefine, Wikidata Integrator, and whatever was available to handle our data. So this project has been going on since 2015, actually. And today I want to talk a little bit more about the details since then. So there is a nested or like a distance to item-based templating system. If you look at the ArtBase, it doesn't look very much like a wiki, but it's actually all a media wiki. So and for the distance-based templating, I wanna introduce like this. So here we are looking at an artwork at the most far away distance, at the closest distance. So we see like all the details of it, all the related items are fetched and rendered. But there's also a more distant view of the artwork, which is, for example, here in the overview for the artworks that were created in the year 2000. So you see the same artwork is rendered as like a tile here. There's an even further distance for it where it's just a link, and even farther away, it's just the name of the work. The same is true of the variants. So this is how artworks are manifested. You see we have outside links, web archive versions, file copy versions of that. And this is like a relatively close view to it. There's also just a button for access, which is a farther away view. And as you can see here, this can all be nested into different views. And yeah, I want to invite you to look at the Lua source code, which is here, one of the Lua modules. Basically, it's invoked like this. You can either render it and it will just render the item that is attached to a certain page, or you can call for a certain item to be rendered at a certain distance. Second, the query service. So federated query service requires basically separate namespaces. So the query service, as it comes with the Docker distribution, has the Wikidata configuration for namespaces, which confuses users because they're trying to apply Sparkle examples that they found on Wikidata, which are which don't map to our data model and so forth. We also needed a way to render local media and commons media to support the federation and our local data. And the final thing is we annotated all the source code changes that were required to do this to the query service. The query service is not yet configurable in the Docker distribution using any variables. So here's an example on how this looks. The examples that we have here, here's for example a federated query which uses an R for rhizome namespace prefix, and you can mix that with WD Wikidata namespace too. So these are some of the templates that we have supplied here regarding prefixes. And any change that we had to apply to the query service is documented on GitHub. Here it's really like with annotation, it means like every single change in every file has contextualization. So we hope that people or like institutions who want to customize their query service will find this useful, and also that this is a step towards actually making the query service configurable without having to change the code. So we already have identified where this needs to happen. Okay. And then what we are working on right now is access quality grading to the artworks in our collection. This means the following thing. So rhizome's preservation system, which like roughly entails the whole art base, is we are able to run emulators online, like legacy computing environments, give access to the artworks in our collection that wouldn't like perform well on today's computing environments that people are using. This is especially interesting for net art, where like the entanglement in between an artwork and the access environment is very loose. People use whatever they do to whatever they have to access net art, and so that's the reason why we have to provide these different environments for access. So here you see a macOS 9 environment that's embedded in like a rhizome exhibition page where you can access an artwork from the year 2000. Here is one that has like a 1996 artwork displayed in Windows 98 environment with VRML 3D graphics and so forth. So how does this work? And then when users want to access this artwork, they can choose sometimes in between different access points. And we are now calculating the quality, or working towards that, to calculate the access quality and give users like a hint what they can expect, how much brokenness they will maybe need to deal with, which is something that we modeled here, which is going to be implemented pretty quick. You have to take a screenshot. This is just a lightning talk. Catch me later on this if you want to discuss. You can see here how this is done. We have machines in our Wikibase. The machines has software installed. Each of the software has like certain capabilities of what type of files or data formats it can handle, which is then mapped to the pronom registry. And the artworks themselves, the variants of the artworks, are manifested as compositions of different data formats. And so, you can kind of understand the idea. Oh, okay. And so find the slides here. That's it. I'm happy to answer questions like in the chat or whatever. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much, Dragan. If you can also paste the link to the slides in the Etherpad, that would be perfect. And next we have Frida Leipold.
Yeah. I can only share my whole screen, not like one element. So I'm just gonna do this again.
Yeah, Frida, please
Okay.
start.
Well, then thank you for the chance to present our research database, which is called the YongeWiki, today as part of the WikidataCon 2021. The YongeWiki is a research database for building research. However, its structure and organization, made up of a combination of Wikibase and MediaWiki, has, in our opinion, the potential to be used by other disciplines as well as a possibility to archive and publish research data. The De Jonge Wiki was created as part of the Palamusto program of the European Union, as a cooperation between the KU Leuven and the Raymond Lemaire, and here we have the slide, and the Raymond Lemaire International Center for Conservation in Belgium, and the Institute for Computer Science of the Ludwig Maximilians University Munich on the other hand. The project received advisory support from the Institute for the Future of Technology at the Karlsruhe Institute of slide already. The basic requirement for the De Jonge Wiki, basic requirements for the De Jonge Wiki were above all these four qualities or requirements. First, the modeling of the research data on the Arenberg Castle as a semantic database. To achieve this, Wikibase was the logical first choice as software. Second, the database should also be easy to understand for readers and editors who are not technically trained, and should have an was the logical first choice as software there. In order to combine the advantages of these two software products, we developed a new and, in our eyes, ingeniously simple solution, but more in a few minutes. The third basic requirement was the ability to run the database on typical web services provided by universities, which naturally led to some restrictions. The fourth and final and possibly most important goal we set ourselves was to create a possible prototype for similar projects in humanities. The basic data structure developed by us should also be reproducible by other projects without large IT budget. Next slide. Before we explain the database itself, I would first like to introduce the subject of the De Jonge Wiki, the Arenberg Castle. The oldest parts of Arenberg Castle date from the early 16th century. New wings were added from the 18th century onwards. Today, it's a four-wing complex around a rectangular courtyard. The castle currently houses the Department of Architecture of the KU Leuven and the aforementioned Lemaire Center. In the course of time, generations of students analyzed the building as part of their training and created a collection of research results, which, however, was not centrally available and in some cases only available in analog form. The De Jonge Wiki represents the attempt to bundle this data, to prepare it according to the current standards and to make it easy accessible. It came from the professor who supervised the research on the castle over the past decades, Kristen de Jonge. And now Max will explain the structure of the database itself.
Exactly. The conceptual model of the De Jonge Wiki is quite simple. It just needs to connect historic sources and scientific sources with different elements of the castle itself. The castle itself, the elements of the castle itself are hierarchically structured in that every element is contained in a larger substructure, while the sources themselves need to be connected to each and every element quite fluently. So this model itself was what we tried to replicate in the De Jonge Wiki inside the structured part. So this is the approach that we used. Of course, we used Wikibase. This is why we do this in Wikibase track, where we try to put in the factual side of everything connected to the scientific sources, for example, where we would track elements like authorship or publishing dates or other factual knowledge related to them, while in the castle structure elements, we try to track things like the length, width, height, or the different rooms and their connections, where we could model like a connection between two rooms, which would lead to a complete walkthrough of the castle from one side to the other. Also, the structured part tracks the mentioning of the different parts of the castle in the sources and links to images provided by our very talented uploaders and collaborators on the wiki. Then this part is connected to the more user-friendly aspect, the outside-facing publishing part of the wiki, which is of course the media wiki, where we import most of the structured information in small template info boxes on the top right corner. You maybe know them from Wikipedia or some places like that. But in this case, the data comes from the local Wikibase instance, where we try to display it where we try to display most of the structured data we actually collect. I'm gonna show you some example later, but the unstructured and continuous text part of the wiki is where you can find some building history explained in normal text form, linked with image gallery. So it feels like a normal article, while in the background it's linked to this structured base. And here we have an example. It's quite small, but you get the gist, I hope. Here's a normal article describing a room in the castle, where we have on the top right a info box generated completely dynamically from the related Wikibase item. So the most of the work that our editors need to do is to actually just import one template, and it dynamically renders everything that the Wikibase side of things has to offer. Not everything, but most of it. And the rest of the article is a traditional MediaWiki article, which is quite useful in our case, because this is something that many people have been in contact with over their lives and don't find quite as scaring as a Wikibase interface. So that's a benefit, to be sure. And on the left side, as you know from Wikipedia, you can just switch to the base layout, where you then can edit those aspects. And of course, the target of this project was to also offer these structured elements in the query Sparkle API interface, which was quite hard to do, as we are using a traditional university hosting infrastructure, which means just web servers and no fancy Docker images, which led to our struggling with the finesses of hosting MediaWiki manually and from hand. But it is doable and is a quite cheap and easy approach to actually provide smaller humanities research-based projects with a quite high level and enormously innovative solution to store their research data. And this is the link to the wiki. We have also put some links to interesting pages on the wiki in the Everpad, where you can click on them and play around. It's completely open, not for editing, but for viewing. And yeah, happy birthday also to Wikidata, like 2 days late, but still, I hope appreciated.
And happy Halloween.
Thanks so much to both of you, Frida and Max. I just want to say that the Etherpad, I don't see the links there. I've just put it in the chat again. So if you don't mind making sure the links are definitely in there.
Okay,
maybe
yeah.
I might be going blind, but yeah, please put them in there. And any questions from the audience, please, yeah, enter them into the Etherpad or connect with the speakers elsewhere in the social spaces around the conference venue today. Thanks so much, Max and Frida. And we would like to move on with the next presentation. which...
I'm going to briefly introduce Banner Repeater in the ways that we've been working over the last 10 years or so now that have led to the development of the Digital Archive of Artist Publishing project. Banner Repeater opened in 2010 as an experimental project space in a reading room on a working train station platform in Hackney, with an on-site public archive dedicated to artist publishing. Central to how we operate is our location, deliberately sited within the ebb and flow of the commuting public, enmeshed within the public transport networks in a busy thoroughfare of passing traffic with over 11,000 passengers a day. Pre-COVID, we opened at 8 to 11 a.m. to take advantage of the packed platform at this time in the morning to distribute artist publishing for free into a main artery of the City of London. An arts programme with newly commissioned works with exhibitions, lectures and performances and launches of new publications focused on the idea of hybrid strategies in network culture that comes of early experimentation in network culture such as artist publishing. There's been a tendency towards work throughout the arts programme that speaks about the human enmeshment with technology as multimedia assemblages with a focus on the dynamic qualities a diagram might propose that act as sites of effective experimentation and a means to consider what might amount to criticality within our accelerating technicity. A fascination with the interdependencies between code and language that exemplify our hyper-network times allows us to think of how textual productions through new technologies inflect, as well as contain traces of the subject emerging in synthesis with their environment. And in the present day, that includes Twitter, TikTok, Instagram and Tumblr, and Facebook, of course. The unpublished series of pamphlets in which artists and writers are commissioned to contribute new writing is a commissioning platform that considers how writing and authorship changes with new advances in tech and exemplifies what we do in that it attempts to think through network sensibilities and how new technologies inflect our daily lives in often very subtle ways. Ideas of authorship, intellectual property, copyright, and the constitution of a reading public come of these histories and an evolving subjectivity that emerges through market relations. As such, network strategies underpin everything we do, pioneering a hybrid way of working in contemporary art practice through the strong symbiosis between the experiments in text and publishing held in the archive and artistic practices engaging in network strategies today. About 4 years ago, Arnaud Desjardins and myself started to talk about what would amount to something worth having of a digital sort for a rapidly growing community in artist publishing. And then, as luck would have it, I began a long conversation with Lizana Rosanova, leading researcher in digital archival practice, that began from a shared interest in artist publishing and a critical engagement with technology, which brings us to where we are today with the benefit of her great expertise. The online platform aims to provide an interactive, user-driven, searchable database of artist books and publications that acts as a hub to engage with others, built by artists, publishers, and a community of producers in contemporary artist publishing. With an emphasis on inclusivity from the start, we aim to privilege anecdotal histories and multiple perspectives alongside factual data, establishing an important new precedent in digital as well as analogue archival practice. The wiki-style approach means that users can upload their own material, single items, or entire collections, choosing appropriate sharing permissions at time of upload. Many problems regarding the digital realm coalesce also in ethical problems central to archiving, such as biases, which may be explicitly or implicitly embedded in database and archive infrastructures. As such, the Archive Project is committed to challenging the politics of traditional archives that come of issues regarding inclusion and accessibility from a post-colonial, critical gender and LGBTQI perspective. The design of the archive is being built with this in mind and developed through user-generated feedback that goes on to inform the design and development of the technological stack of the archive. The project is invested in working towards an equitable and ethical design process that occurs throughout the archive development. Anyone participating in the landscape of artist publishing is welcome to join our user community as active collaborators and stakeholders. We operate what is known as a closed open system for participation, in the sense that everyone can join the archive and contribute, but needs to get in touch with us first, explain why they want to join and get the password code. As with all digital endeavours, it is also important that access is accompanied by the knowledge necessary to make informed decisions about what it is that you are sharing. And we have developed extensive tutorial materials alongside the workshops that are intended to help open up the archive to more users and hold regular ongoing public workshops. We very much hope you will join us in contributing to the archive and making it a place for exchange, gossip and equality. And on that note, I will hand over to Frances Whorrall-Campbell, who has been working with us on the archive for some time now.
Thanks, Amy. I think that I turned my camera on before I shared the slideshow, so I'm afraid I might just be a disembodied voice. But yeah, as Amy was saying, in the DAAP, the Wikibase software is what enables us to embody a fluid approach to archiving that approaches a similar dynamism to that of Banner Repeater. Just as Banner is concerned with flows of information, the DAAP uses linked data to connect existing collections, which are traditionally siloed online through individual catalogues. As a database built on wiki principles, the DAAP uses the subject-predicate-object triple that is the backbone of linked open data to restructure the grammar of traditional cataloging, where the item is usually a singular entity with a fixed ontology and placed into a hierarchical structure, to create instead branching networks. This Wikibase backend is complemented by a custom front-end interface, which serves as an entry point for browsing and discovery across collections. The front end pulls data from the backend via templated Sparkle queries. Queries allow us to show descriptive information alongside bibliographic data for each work, showcasing connections between works, copies, and collections and other related works. Significantly, different editions and versions of works are not structured and represented in a hierarchical manner, but rather each version is conceptualized as a new item in the database, connected to earlier versions or editions, but not considered a subcategory, highlighting the unique aspects of artist publications and allowing a freer use of contextual metadata around the works. And you can see an example here from both the front end on the left and then on the right, the back end, how it's how this other version or this related work is listed. The lack of fixed hierarchies and ontologies is combined in the DAAP with an open source approach, which gives users the autonomy to upload and catalogue material themselves, producing an archive that grows and develops organically around community needs. This has arisen out of the DAAP's emphasis on challenging the traditional exclusions and accessibility issues of archives and an understanding of how traditional standards used to structure bibliographical data online reproduce existing biases and discriminations in practice. Our use of wiki text pages allows the data items, alongside data items, allows for anecdotal histories to be added, prioritizing a multiplicity of voices, introducing gossip into the archive, ways of speaking and voices not usually heard, whilst detailing source and attribution metadata is added to each textual entry. And again, you can see a comparison here between the front end description and the way that the description looks on the back end of the wiki text pages, as I described. This allows us to open the field ethically and artistically. Allowing people to describe themselves and change descriptions over time is particularly interesting to the problems of archiving faced by queer and trans communities. And this is expanded on in an essay I wrote about the archive and other digital artworks for Art Agenda. But this is also flexible enough to allow artists to experiment with the database and use it for new purposes. For example, publishing works, such as this example here seen on the slide of Harun Morrison's zine, where a download link on the digital archive of artist publishing becomes the means of publication and distribution. This flexibility and pushing of the boundaries of the archive is made possible by the DAAP's commitment to training and education, which Amy already mentioned, so I won't go over here now. And I'd like to hand over to Stuart from Wikimedia to finish the presentation.
Brilliant, thank you, Frances. Yes, so we're running out of time, but very briefly, yes, so Wikimedia UK have been involved in this not quite since its beginning, but we came in to provide some funding, but also help with the workshops. What's been interesting about this project for us is this participatory building of an ontology. And the flexibility kind of involved in that. And as Frances just mentioned, like kind of shifting ways of identifying or talking about things, all of which was, you know, unavailable if you're thinking from a kind of Wikidata point of view. And back in 2017, 2018, this was the option. Oh, I can try and turn my camera. Don't know if that's not working. Oh yeah, it is working.
Should I end the show?
Oh, exciting. Doesn't really add much, to be honest. So in terms of kind of building this up, we helped run some of the workshops with an interesting community of contributors, some with a more data perspective, some with a more artist publishing perspective. And there were some really interesting outcomes in terms of sort of subtle changes in terms of how people talked about structure and how people wanted to contribute. And I think this is a really useful social element of building Wikibase with a particular constituency of people. And I think there's a lot of lessons kind of going forward in terms of other people setting up Wikibase instances around particular communities. So as I said, we're running slightly out of time. This project hopefully continues to still grow, and the community of contributors, individual and institutional, will still go. As has been noted in the chat, the front end is lovely, and I think will help making contributing and participating in the project that much easier and more visually pleasing for such a visual project as well, for its community. And yeah, that's all I've got to say.
Thanks so much, Stuart. Lucas, we can pause the recording now while we switch over, but if...
do you want me to put it in the public chat?
Yeah, if you don't mind. I mean, unless
Okay.
you mind.
Well, I haven't took my notes out yet, so y'all get a back-end surprise. All right.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, no problem.
Go ahead.
Right. So, my name is Jessika Davis, and today we're going to have a lightning talk with how the Semantic Lab has been using Wikibase and kind of bring you along our Wikibase journey. The Semantic Lab, just to give you some context, is a research group at Pratt Institute School of Information. If you want to go to the next slide, that'd be wonderful. We are in New York City. I'm currently a graduate student there. My study is with masters in museums and digital culture. And many students like myself and graduates join the lab to learn and experiment with new methods and tools for the application of semantic technologies to libraries, archives, and museums. Additionally, it serves as a way to get proficient with the wiki environment as well. Next slide, please. Kind of give you a little bit of a taste, kind of take you through the journey of the life cycle to see how we got here. We did initially start in Wikibase. There was a project called LinkJazz that really has evolved over time and also multiple platforms. It initially started out in DPpedia and then kind of went on to Wikidata, but found that the project was a bit too esoteric and was quickly evolving. So needed to move on to something else that could accommodate that kind of more, elastic way in which we were approaching the project. So Wikibase was a good fit. We loaded, we already had LinkJazz in RDF, so we were able to kind of like bootstrap that into our Wikibase. We know that doesn't really happen a lot with how Wikibase-based projects are started. But it really enabled us to kind of create additional properties on the fly and really open up new possibilities. Beyond the LinkJazz, we kind of moved into other cultural heritage areas, and really having Wikibase has enabled us to come up with the infrastructure to manage those other projects, all within the same place. And so 2020 was really like the critical mass, like load time for all the different projects that we were, starting to get interested in working in tandem, whether it be the Robert Rauschenberg project, which kind of had it splintered off into multiple different sub-projects like EAT and LOD. And then also the LinkJazz project also splintered off into other different sub projects as well. So really interesting to have a kind of base camp, if you will, to allow us to kind of be curious and go down a path, but yet still kind of being able to connect, come back home, if you will. And 2021, we're still amassing all of that data, really in preparation for researchers or other students or other users to be able to query it. Next slide, please. Some things that we really like about Wikibase is just the provenance aspect of it, where it serves as our historical record. So here, instance, we just did a Sparkle query for instance of a project class that we created. And this kind of helps us keep track of the timeline of everything, and know, at the statement level, kind of where everything started, and really helps us have these data endpoints with permanent URIs, which would allow future connections with linked open data as well. It allows us to be able to incrementally grow over time and, enriching the knowledge base with adding reciprocal benefit in that regard. Next slide, please. I think the two main things that we have really enjoyed working with Wikibase is just the collaborative modeling. We're a part of a school, and a lot of times there's professors, our co-directors, Christina Paciuelli and Matt Miller are both professors at Pratt, and a lot of us are students, and some of us are even graduates coming back to join up with the semantic lab. But we're able to work independently, but then also come together and negotiate creation of user properties together, and really allows a lot of different people to participate in the projects and different projects that they're running. Newer users can get onboarded faster. It's intuitive. It's not intimidating. I can account to that. I'm the newest member. I started in spring of this year, so very new. It's also really versatile. So, as we create our own entities, open new properties, change labels, make adjustments, we are not worried that we're going to break everything. So no negative domino effect really allows us that flexibility and versatility. And that's really not, really able to do that in traditional ontology building approach. And, it really helped everything like move the projects forward without getting stuck or getting kind of caught up on like, how do we get this new project to fit into our ontology that we created? We're able to adjust and move pretty fluidly. All right, next slide, please. The other, we can't sugarcoat it. There's some things that we learned along the way. We are locked into Wikibase. If we decide to do something different, we probably need to change course in that regard. Also locked into Wikibase Docker, and that comes at the mercy of someone else developing it. And we've had some challenges getting data in and out of it. So with that comes sometimes we can't be perfect. We also can't merge some items, which is broken in our particular Wikibase instance. So it's not perfect, but we are still kind of working through ways in which to overcome it and kind of fixing it as we can. But I think lessons learned are always adding to the richness of your end result project. Next slide, please. With the ability for Wikibase to kind of help our kind of multiple projects working in tandem, we've also had some time to put some tools or create some tools that lay on top of the data. This mostly from one of our co-director, Matt Miller, has created them. They're different discovery systems. They work in lockstep with Wikibase, and they actually help a lot with alleviating the manual processing of some of the free text from some of these documents that we're working with. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. So this kind of shows just an example of the workflow that utilizes some of these tools. We have a digitized document, sometimes it could be a handwritten document. And the new tools that we have are Pomodoro and C'est La Vie. Pomodoro is an OCR tool which can help identify text, and then the output is a TXT file. Then we kind of go through some hand coding to understand like what we want to pull out of that document that's important for our Wikibase to make statements, and then uploading that into quick statements to create those entities and properties, and then building triples in C'est La Vie, and then eventually ingesting it into Wikibase. And if you want to just quickly go through the next couple of slides, it kind of shows a little bit in more detail. So this is just a little bit of Pomodoro. This is the, just kind of shows from text to a TXT file, and then entity coding, and then we have quick statements, and then we have C'est La Vie. So this is showing the how to build the triples with C'est La Vie tool. So you can kind of paint all the, it's really cool. You can paint it, it's great. You can paint, the triples that you're going to be making. And then if you go to the next slide, that's just an example of just kind of taking you through the end result of what that particular entity looks like in Wikibase. So just to give you some context, these are some sound-wired tennis rackets, and they're physical rackets that were used in experimental art performance in the 1960s, called Open Score, part of the Robert Rauschenberg projects under the EAT LOD project. And go to the next slide, please. So in closing, Wikibase is just our base point, is our base camp. It's our starting point. It's a welcoming entry point for various levels of users. We have project provenance, and really it helps us discover new connections that maybe we didn't have from these like different projects that were kind of coming together and amassing in one location. We're able to, this data structure really allows us to support those various topics. And right now we're kind of working with New York City type topics, dance, art, jazz, and I'm sure there'll be many more as we kind of grow our data set. And it's been really interesting to see the connections when these particular topics intersect. Ultimately, it's just beyond technical. This has allowed us, a conduit for collaboration. It's malleable for future collaboration, and really encouraged us to have that, cooperative aspect of it. And we're processing more documents and ingesting more data, and really excited to see, what other researchers and users will discover. And that's it. And if you go to the next slide, just shows some the fun context, fun contact. And I think I'm at time, right?
Yeah, amazing. Thank
Okay.
you so much, Jessika. Perfect timing. So next.
Okay. So good afternoon or good day, depending on your time zone at the moment. So thank you very much for having me here. I am today presenting some of my experiment with Wikibase and Semantic Media Wiki, something I experimented a few times in the past couple of years, and something I also presented in other convention like the Semantic Media Wiki convention and the Media Wiki Hackathon previously this year and last year. But in this specific presentation, I will just show you or focus on a couple of problems I discovered with Wikibase and how I was able to overcome them with the little help from Semantic Media Wiki. So just to focus the problem or the situation, well, differently from the presentations that was showed previously, this one is more leisure than study oriented or school oriented or university oriented. Actually, we are talking here about something that is purely pleasure, meaning a guide, a fan site that was devoted to Star Trek, and the specific installation we are talking about is a Wikibase website called DataTrack that is the primary data provider for another website, a wiki that is called WikiTrack. It is the most complete and most comprehensive guide to the Star Trek universe in Italian. This specific wiki was created after a porting of a previously existing guide called Hypertrack that was maintained by a friend of ours that unfortunately didn't have enough time to work on it, and after it was the update was stopped by him, I decided to start to port it as to a wiki in order to simplify the possibility for more users to collaborate and edit the wiki on their own. So I performed the porting of that website that was actually a custom-made PHP website that acted as a front end with database. I ported it to a Media Wiki standard site, and my original idea was, or my original task was, to convert all the data from the database and the front end to a bunch of static pages. After the project went live, it became clear that a simple static website was very difficult to maintain and lacked some capability to be dynamic. So after almost a couple of years since the inception of the project, I started investigating some solution to made actually the site a little bit more dynamic. So here it comes my first test with the Wikibase that started back in the beginning of 2029, and finally the deployment of the final DataTrack website that by pure chance was born this day in last year. So The site, of course, did the basic of the job, meaning on the Wikibase instance on DataTrack, we saved and put all the information regarding episodes, of course, primarily, and characters and actors' performance and so on. So the basic functionality, of course, of the site was to provide basic data to the wiki front end. So in this screenshot, you can simply see one of the info box we are using in the Wikitrack website, and all the data are taken from the corresponding item in that data track. So this was automatically generated, and it is very easy now to add the information to data track and get with a simple template all the data into Wikitrack. This shouldn't come to a surprise to anyone. Another place where we have heavily used the data track capability is to create a list of external link for instance for each episodes. In this way we used custom properties to link to any kind of website. After that, we use the site links that are used by the Wikibase instance to link pages about the same topic from different MediaWiki-based installations, and then the ability to automatically generate external ID to sites that used some kind of database-based catalog, for instance, Internet Movie Database or the StarTrek.com original database. So this is where the system worked very well. There were unfortunately specifically two areas where I encountered some issues. The first one was the necessity to create pages into the wiki where a list of episodes are listed. For instance, a page containing all the episodes of a certain series, or a page containing episodes of a specific series of a specific season. That was one problem that was not easily solved with the current connection. Second one, another problem was how to link each performance to the performances in every episodes. In all the episodes, there's a field performer where we list all the actors, their roles, and their credit. But we didn't want to add this, to duplicate this data, meaning to add in each performance item the data of the episodes or the movies where he or she acted in. So we wanted a way to do this, to collect this information automatically. Unfortunately, this was not that easy to do with standard Wikibase tools and Wikibase capabilities. So if we had a classical relationship database as the previous the site that came before Wikitrack had, it would have been very easy, for instance, to do the list of a season by simply run some kind of SQL statement. Of course, it would have been possible to run some Sparkle onto DataTrack, but that would have meant to set up an entire query service like the WQS, and it would have been difficult or maybe impossible to simply embed the result of the query within wiki pages. So I needed to find another solution for this. At first, I thought about retracing my evaluation before that I did originally, where I was considering, of course, Cargo and Semantic Media Wiki and Wikibase to support the data set to Wikitrack. At a point, I I was almost ready to throw away Wikibase and move to Semantic Media Wiki, because Semantic Media Wiki had or has a more flexible way of querying. But on the other side, I should have thrown away a lot of work made on the Wikibase installation and give up the one of the goal of the project, that was to provide an open data repository that possibly eventually in the future other websites might have willing to use. After much thinking, I actually came up with a solution that was basically easier than I thought before, that nowhere is written that Wikibase and Semantic Media Wiki can't work together, and in fact they can work together. So what I did was to preserve the Wikibase instance and data track, so is still the primary container of information of the site, but the data read from there are presented into Wikitrack with semantic meaning added. Here you can see a very simple example, where before I simply wrote down into the wiki text of the info box just the label season and got the related property from data track. With this new setup, I use again the label season, but I added the season semantic label to the value. So in this way, I am only storing the data once into the data track, but when the data is transferred to Wikitrack, there it acquires a semantic meaning. So just to summarize, after I put all the semantic information to the seasons, for instance, and the series and so on, then it's very easy to write a simple query like this one in Semantic Media Wiki, and as you can see from the partial screenshot on the right, it was very easy to get all the links, all the full list, and with the proper links of all the episodes in a single season of a show. That was done by taking all the data again from data track, but with a simple Semantic Media Wiki Semantic Media Wiki query. The other
Luca,
problem.
I'm very sorry, but I think we are really out of time now because we're just at the
Yes.
hour. I
Okay.
wonder, because this is super interesting, and I think like people will really appreciate the technical detail. If you don't mind, would you be able to share your slides?
Of course, I will upload them in
the
Commons in the category of the presentation of this convention.
Brilliant. And I would suggest, dropping the link to the slides in the Etherpad. And if people have questions,
yes, yeah, absolutely.
Please add your questions in the Etherpad, and
yes.
Luca, keep an eye on it until the rest of the day, and maybe you can answer some questions.
Yes,
I'm very sorry about this, but we do need to.
Don't worry.
Move on.
I unfortunately also need to leave for this afternoon, but I will be back later this evening, and I will keep definitely an eye on Etherpad and answer as best as I can too.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And Lucas, maybe we can stop this